Continuing on with marriage, what brings us together today? Polyandry, polygyny, sorry. Polygamy with an M is any kind of marriage. Polygyny is one man with more women, multiple women, polygyny. And polyandry is marriage between one woman and two or more men at the same time. So fraternal polyandry is pretty common in some remote parts of Nepal and northern India and the Himalayas. The Himalayan mountains, farmable land is pretty scarce, and it is these are patrilineal societies. So the ownership over the land passes through the son's line from father to son, and there's just not enough land to have five sons all marry women and have five sons each. So instead, all five sons marry a single woman. She just has five kids or five sons, and those five sons are all children of the same brothers, right? So all land is inherited through the multiple dads. They're all brothers. One single mother who is limited in number of children she can have, just physically, biologically, economically, and so it reduces the growth rate to basically one to one. Over time, it keeps the population stable. It's basically a means of resisting population growth to conserve land. Um, Love, of course, you end up with extra women who don't get married, and that's got its own problems as well. Love without marriage in South India. Love as permanent intoxication. Here, people do have love, they just don't get married over it. Many cultures have this. It's just that a few cultures see romantic attraction as a legitimate basis for marriage. Marriage, in most cultures, the people believe that marriage should be based on something much more secure than romantic attraction. Why? Well, one, marriage is much too important to risk on love. Marriage is a much more complicated thing than romantic attraction. Um, a child's marriage is the most important and often most expensive decision a South Asian family ever has to make. So the equivalent would be for most Americans buying a house. If you have a 21-year-old son or a 22-year-old daughter, would you go to them and say which mortgage terms should we go with? Which neighborhood should we buy in? Do you, 25-year-old boy, think we should go with the adjustable rate or the fixed rate? Who should go do the inspection? How much should we put in escrow? How much do we need for earnest money? And you ask a typical 25-year-old that, and they're just going to look at you and say, well, I don't care. This is not my deal. And it's the same with marriage, right? Most 25-year-olds can't figure out all the stuff that's involved in a huge investment like getting married. So they just put it off and say, look, you figure it out. I trust you, parents. When the wealth of an entire extended family is on the line, everyone in the extended family has a vested interest in the union, and arranged marriages are the norm and the ideal. Now, when we say arranged marriage, we're not necessarily talking about forced marriage. Remember, we jumped over the polygamy, the Kenya, the forced marriage. That's a different sort of thing. But here we're not talking necessarily about forcing someone to get married. We're talking about abuse, forcing people to stay married. But here we're talking about arranged marriage. So arranged marriage is a sign of parental love. Um, People get married and then they get unmarried. In many parts of the Middle East, the divorce rate is 50%. It's the same as what it is around here. Uh, 40 to 50% of marriages end in the first couple of years. People try it out. They're like, nah, this is not working. Or people get engaged, and usually an engagement is a pretty big step. It doesn't necessarily mean they're sleeping together, but it does mean that they spend a lot of time together. Legally, they can talk and spend time. Yeah, legally in terms of family law, right? The couple who are engaged can spend a lot of time together. can get to know each other, and they'll be engaged for like a month or 6 months or even a year, and then at the end of it say, no, no, there's no way I can foresee myself spending any more time in the same room with this person. And the parents are like, cool, we'll try someone else. Uh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Even people get married, right? And they spend a month or 2 months or a year or 2 years, and they're just like, man, this is terrible. He's not at all the person I thought that he was when we got married. And the parents are like, cool, we'll call it off, unwind it, and try again somewhere else. Um, so it's all about parental love and support and concern for the future, not just next year, but 20 years down the line. Are you truly going to be happy in this relationship? Um, so as a result, dating is rarely the path to marriage. Youth don't even worry about it. They don't worry about dating. They focus on their education, and many South Asian societies, South Asian families, even in the United States, don't do a lot of dating. The higher they achieve in education, the higher the status of their potential marriage partner. So, partly the parents are looking to match couples. So, if you have a Harvard MBA, are you going to be happy marrying someone who doesn't have a Harvard degree? You should marry someone who's also got maybe a Princeton PhD or something like that. Because if you are unequal in the marriage, then that's opportunity for abuse, exploitation, making the other person feel bad because they don't have the same kind of credentials, and it leads to instability. Whereas if two equal partners are coming together, then that's going to be something that can be sustained over the course of a lifetime. Love marriages represent an arrangement beset with enormous insecurity. People fell in love and they're total opposites and they have nothing in common. And you look at it, you're like, yeah, I don't think this is going to last. And everyone can see it. And so that's why parents put the kibosh on it. Origins of the love marriage. Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution is incidentally the origin of non-procreative marriages more generally, including same-sex marriage. We might have mentioned this, that when you have agriculture as the basis of your economy, you need lots and lots of workers. When you have non-industrialized agriculture and all the work is done by hand, you need lots and lots of children every generation to work the land. And this is why the United States continued its agricultural development all the way to the 1930s. It didn't actually fully industrialize until after that, until the 40s and 50s. Because there was so much land, and there's so much land, there's so much farming you can do, so many big families you can have. And it was only in the 40s and the 50s that families actually started really shrinking, and the natural increase in the United States started to come down a bit. Because once you're out of agricultural economy and into an industrial economy, you don't really need kids um, for the economic value they confer, and so non-procreative marriages result, and those include same-sex marriages, right? Older people getting married, people who are sterile or people who are not planning on having kids, people who are of the same sex and can't have kids. This is not a big deal anymore economically. So ideology follows economy again. Sorry, my Marxist bias is coming through here. Materialist bias. If you don't get paid to do it, why are you doing it? Competing effects, freedom and anomy. So number one is the Industrial Revolution. Um, um, Number two is competing effects. The Industrial Revolution basically frees people up to choose who they want to marry. They marry for the relationship, but not necessarily for the relationship now, and not necessarily for the future economic stability of the couple. We're much more this quarter, right? What are you going to do for me in terms of capital gains this quarter? Uh, Not necessarily. How are we going to, institute a long-term strategy here? Competing effects, freedom and anomy. Freedom involves autonomous individual choices. Anomy involves the feeling of being lost and disconnected. So these two together, number one, I want to do what I want to do, and number two, which happens in other societies as well, in arranged marriages. I mean, that's we just talked about that. The taxi drivers, working, living in some little, guy from Mexico or Guatemala coming, working for a decade, living with 10 other roommates in this little tiny 2-bedroom apartment, working like crazy, saving, building up this stash of $10,000, and then going back and getting married to the woman he wanted to get married to, and not to the one his parents picked out. And that's the whole goal. It's all about sort of getting that nest egg for autonomy's sake, right? Autonomy. I want to marry the one I want to marry. I don't want anyone else telling me what to do. And this is a very high value. We know that. We know that from the whole meaning of white men, right? That even in societies that are very, very small scale and that are not capitalist at all, there's still a fight to resist the pressure from other people telling me what to do, and to establish my own way of living, even if it means intense deprivation for a decade.